There's no way a doctor can know exactly what is covered under every patient's plan. There's hundreds of thousands of procedures and medications and care options. So with direct connections between the EHR and the plans, we're able to deliver that information in real time when it matters most.
So hello and welcome to the Healthtech Marketing Podcast, brought to you by Health Launchpad and HIMSS. Hi, I'm Adam Chirinas. I'm your host for today. I'm the CEO and founder of Health Launchpad. And I want to give a big thank you to you for listening. I also want to give a big thank you to my partner in crime here, the amazing and awesome HIMSS. Today I'm really delighted to introduce our guest for today, Adam Rosenberg. How can a podcast get any better? It's got two Adams on it. Adam is the director of marketing of RXRevu, really interesting, high growth. I'd say startup. They're not really a startup, been going for a while now, but it's a high growth company in healthcare technology. So Adam, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Excellent. Tell us a bit about yourself and RXRevu.
So I actually started my career in sales about a decade ago, healthcare technology sales at the advisory board company. So I really learned the ropes of healthcare marketing and sales, what it takes to build relationships with healthcare executives, and learn a lot about the intricacies of the healthcare market. After the advisory board had transitioned and been acquired by Optum, I moved over to different growth marketing roles and lead generation roles. I did a stint in digital advertising and social media, moved out to Colorado from Washington, D.C., and started at a company called WellTalk, which was acquired by Virgin Pulse just a couple months ago, and then ended up at RXRevu, where I kind of oversee everything from start to finish, from content and product marketing to events and digital, lead gen and sponsorship. So across the last decade, I've really gotten my fingers wet or gotten my feet wet in a lot of different areas across marketing. And I think that's actually really important. It's really important for marketers to get their hands dirty in various areas of healthcare marketing so that they can effectively run or lead a marketing organization. The second part of your question, RXRevu, really interesting company, been here about 2.5 years. What we're doing is really creating this network of health plan and PBM data, so coverage and cost information, and then delivering it through to the point of care. So providers and patients can understand what the cost of care is going to be, if there are lower cost alternatives, if there are different locations that might be covered by their insurance. So we're seeing great results through our network. We're saving patients money. We're helping plans drive formulary adherence and care adherence. And we're really just improving access to healthcare overall. So it's been a fun journey. And hopefully that's good background on myself and RXRevu.
Yeah. I mean, just go back to your background a bit. So, it's not a lot of marketing people have actually been salespeople. I certainly haven't. Well, that's not true. I was a marketing person, and then I started a company, and then so I had to sell. But not many people have actually been through the journey that you've gone through, which is you started, sales, particularly for a company like the advisory board, very much as a relationship selling company. And now, you're running marketing. So I'm just kind of curious. So, as a salesperson, what would you like to tell the marketing side of yourself? And as a marketing person, what would you like to tell the salesperson side of yourself?
Yeah. Every organization I've been at, there's some sort of friction between marketing and sales. At the end of the day, I think both are aligned in the goal of growing the company that we're working with, or better serving our partners. But there's always different goals or different incentives that are laid out in front of each of the teams. At the end of the day, I think healthcare is relationship driven. And I think marketing can serve a role in helping drive relationships for sales. So at the advisory board, it was a very relationship-driven business. We worked very closely with our account management counterparts to upsell or sell additional products and services. So that's 100% based on our current relationship with our clients. But also our sales executives had been in the market for years, if not decades, and had built relationships with some of the largest health systems in the country. And the role of marketing was really to help foster those relationships, definitely to position the company well across multiple channels, whether that's content, webinars, conferences, or what have you. But marketing can really help support a sales team by building those relationships, whether that's through referral campaigns, whether that's through setting up events where we can bring our clients and prospects together, hosting webinars with clients and with prospects, right? There's a lot of relationship building activities that marketing can own that really support sales. And I think sales is really more receptive to that relationship building aspect of marketing instead of just going to an event or hosting a webinar or driving leads, which is always incredibly important. But if we do it in a smart way through building relationships, I think there's additional value and benefit.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think, and I do think that there are a lot of companies I think still struggle with that demarcation between relationship building with your existing customers, the role of marketing relationship building versus the role of marketing just go get us new customers. That's the role of marketing. And there are a lot of companies I think still struggle with how to do both. I'm curious though, so as a marketing guy, how does it affect the decisions you make? How does your sales experience affect the decisions you make as a marketing guy?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot in my first couple of years at the advisory board being in sales. I mean, I was hitting the phones, emailing executives at health systems. And then as I transitioned over to marketing, I was supporting the people who were hitting the phones and emailing people and sending out content. So I think I learned a lot about language and communication and what resonates to different audiences. So the advisory board primarily was selling technology and research to hospital and health system leaders. As I think about RXRevu, it's a little bit more complicated. There's the supply side of our business. We're getting data from our health plan partners, from our PBM partners. So we need to continually, quote unquote, sell to them or partner with them. But then there's the demand side of the business. We need to get that data through to large hospital systems, EHRs, and other e-prescribing technologies. So we need to sell to the other side of the business as well. So I think it's really important to understand, and what I've learned across the last couple of years is there is never one specific message that works for every audience. Yes, we all agree that we want to improve patient health and we want to make healthcare better. But those are lofty statements. That might be what we put on our website. But at the end of the day, we need to have a specific message for the providers. So we're improving their workflows. We're helping them better engage with patients. We're lowering costs, right? So very specific messaging for providers. For our payer and PBM partners, it might be driving adherence, hitting quality metrics like gaps in care and HEDIS, getting patients on formulary to help reduce costs. And then for EHR vendors, better workflows, better user experience, right? So in every message that we put in the market, you need to think about who the audience is, what is the benefit or value to that specific stakeholder, And we're actually redesigning our website right now to be much more persona driven, because I think the messages that resonate with a CFO are not going to be the messages that resonate with a CIO or a CMO. And I learned all of that across the last couple of years, but that started really at the advisory board. They had 20 different research memberships, and each one was targeted at a very narrow audience. So we really had to be specific about the messaging that we were using.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, a real challenge. And there's a it takes a lot of discipline to manage different messages for different audiences. Because I think, typically the role of head of marketing is to drive a single message, a single brand. But it makes complete sense is that you've got to, for the different audiences, you've got to make that brand relevant in different ways, and that you use different messages to do that. Very hard to keep discipline, because once you sort of take the governor off of a single message, single brand, you can become a free-for-all. How do you sort of maintain some discipline around it? RXRevu is quite a sizable company, right? I mean, roughly how many people is it?
Yeah. I think we're right above 80 people now.
Right. Okay. So in salespeople, probably about 10, 20, something like that, right? So, I mean, so how do you kind of keep everybody sort of like, okay, you've got 3 messages, and this is what you pitch to these guys, this is what you pitch to these guys, and say you pitch. How do you kind of keep the guardrails on those messages?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's really timely. We're going through a rebranding right now, and we're thinking about our messaging in the market and how we position ourselves and our products and solutions. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, yes, there are specific messages and value points for providers, payers and PBMs, EHRs and vendors, but there is also that overarching who we are as a company. We've worked internally and with consultants and brand experts to really understand who we are as a company, what our values are. We instill those throughout the interview process, throughout onboarding. Every month, our team hosts sessions for our staff so that we can stay aligned around that mission and that messaging. So I don't want to say we're only talking about the value to our partners. There's also the overarching message of who we are as a company and what our goals are. In terms of really educating the commercial teams about the messaging as we continue to update it over time, there is a lot of back and forth between sales, commercial, and marketing. We try to collect feedback as much as possible. We've set up some structures where there's a general email inbox that they can send intel to, or there's a competitive intel dashboard where we can view information on competitors, and that helps drive our product development and marketing messaging. So there's a lot of inbound feedback. And then when we are able to analyze that and really synthesize it down to key messages, we work with our leadership team on setting up in-days or kind of annual kickoffs or things like that, where everyone can come together. We can collaborate on what the best content might be, what the best messaging might be, and we can really make sure everyone's on the same page and telling the same story. We happen to have 3 different sales teams under one umbrella. So we have a sales team that specifically focuses on health systems. We have a sales team that focuses on the payer market and PBM market. And then we have EHRs and vendors. But they all do come together at our annual onsite and figure out what is resonating. And they can pick and choose the lines or the messaging that would transfer over to the other markets. So there's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of back and forth between commercial and marketing. But at the end of the day, it's up to my organization to synthesize all of those notes and all of those thoughts into a streamlined PowerPoint presentation, flyer, and script so that the sales team feels armed to hit the ground running soon thereafter.
I think there's a very important lesson in there, Adam, which is that you get buy-in and adherence by making the process inclusive and collaborative.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of companies that just that's not, for whatever reason, how they do things. And that's where you get, salespeople might reject the message or just say, yeah, well, I'll pretend I'm using the messages, but actually, when I'm sending my emails out, I'm going to send out what I think works.
I'd rather, just like you're saying, I'd rather them tell me what they think works and I provide input rather than me just giving them something and saying, this is what you have to use. I'd rather it be a collaborative effort so that they feel empowered to use the tools that we've provided.
Well, and I think it goes back to the fact that you've been a salesperson as well as a marketing person, is that you're empathetic with them. So you kind of you've been in their shoes, right? And so it comes to you naturally to do that. I'm actually just following up on this sort of multiple messages for multiple, for 3 messages for 3 different audiences. How do you manage that from a budget standpoint? Because I mean, each one would probably demand the entire marketing budget of the company. I don't, how do you divide up that? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, it's funny. Each budget or each market, we definitely could spend our whole budget on as we think about entering new markets and more deeply penetrating different markets. We get requests to sponsor a conference for $50K or $100K, or develop a research white paper that requires interviews and surveys in different markets. So there are lots of expensive things that we could do that might appeal to the provider market or the EHR market, and we need to figure out what works and what doesn't. I think it's the cliche answer, but we try to leverage the data as best we can. So I've been at RXRevu 2.5 years, where we stood up this marketing organization, and we're starting to understand, okay, webinars for providers, we typically get 200 registrants, 100 attendees, 25 qualified leads, for example, right? So we're starting to understand what that...
Those are good numbers, right?
Those are great numbers, right? So we're trying to understand what that funnel looks like with different organizations. So there's dozens of organizations out there, HIMSS included, where we think about, can we do a webinar with HIMSS on a specific topic? Who might the audience be? What is the value to our commercial team of that webinar or of that campaign? So trying to leverage the data really helps. It also, data specifically in terms of advertising has been really valuable. So LinkedIn, for example, you're able to target specific markets. So I can say, we want to target the largest 100 health systems with this specific ad. And we want to target the top 20 EHR vendors with this ad. And we want to target the top 10 PBMs with this ad. And that's a much easier distinction because each market is receiving its own ad, and we can track that ad individually. So we can see how many impressions are those ads getting, how many clicks are those ads getting, and do those clicks lead to form submits on our website. So leveraging the data is really helpful in understanding where our budget or kind of framing where our budget should go. I'll be honest. I think the other thing is anecdotally working with the leadership team on the priorities for the year. So in the fourth quarter of every year, as we start planning for the following year, we're looking at our penetration in a specific market and where we want to expand. So if we maybe didn't hit our sales goals or our lead goals in the provider market, maybe we only signed on 20 health systems instead of 30. Maybe we want to invest a couple thousand more dollars in webinars, a couple thousand in advertising, a couple thousand more in events like HIMSS and others where providers are centric. So using data and kind of anecdotal strategy and decision making, we're able to kind of build a budget for each of the markets.
Yeah. So what you guys are doing, I mean, you're I've got to imagine are at the center of a bunch of different policy changes that are going on in healthcare. How do you capitalize on that? How does that affect the way that you market?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There is so much happening now in terms of policy in DC. There's kind of two major types of policy that we're tracking. So there's a ton of policy specifically around access to patient data. So that was the 21st Century Cures Act and information blocking, CMS interoperability rules, changes to HIPAA that have come up recently. So just getting access to patient information, whether that's patients having access to their own information or patient information going from one system to another, or providers having access to that information. So access to patient data is the first kind of bucket of policy that we're following. The other is specifically around access to pricing information. So there is the hospital price transparency rule, which we can talk about in a minute, the health plan price transparency rule, which is coming, I think, in the next couple months, No Surprises Act, right? So there's a lot of rules specific to giving transparency into the cost of care, and helping patients and providers understand what the care is going to cost regardless of coverage.
Yep.
Personally, and I think there is a lot still in the works, a lot of these rules are just starting to make an impact. And I think there's a lot more that can be done to really make sure that price transparency and interoperability are realized. Mm-hmm. So the hospital price transparency rule, for example, says something like the top 300 services that a hospital provides needs to be in a machine readable format, kind of et cetera, et cetera. But there are so many questions that arise from that, right? Like, is that information patient specific? Is it plan specific? Is it moment in time specific? Right? So what RXRevu is focusing on is getting both the pricing information and the patient information to the doctor's hands so that when a patient is speaking with a doctor, they know exactly what the care is going to cost. They know exactly where they can get that care and if there are lower cost options. I've been in healthcare a decade now. I still need a doctor to make most of my care decisions for me. I have no idea what medication I should be on for a sickness that I have, and I have no idea what care I should receive if I have a complex kind of situation happen. So what we think is the most valuable place to get the data is into the doctor's hands. And the policy is going in that direction. There is a specific rule from CMS that came out at the beginning of last year that Medicare plans need to connect to a real-time coverage and cost tool. So Medicare plans have really started this shift towards real-time price transparency, which is great. And we signed on a lot of health plans because that rule was coming up so quickly. But now we need the rest of the industry to follow.
That's so interesting. I mean, that's that's a win-win for everybody. I mean, I know there's all sorts of reasons why providers might be reticent to make their price transparency, not least of all, it's just really complicated. It's just like, it's a procedure costs has different pricing depending on who you are. I mean, depending on what insurance you have or not, which facility you happen to be in and which day of the week. So incredibly difficult for physicians, and incredibly difficult for them to be able to provide patients what they, doctors want to be able to answer the question how much this is going to cost. They can't do it. I mean, they don't know. So if you can do that, so it's the win-win-win, right? Patients win, the physicians win, and then ultimately the providers win, because it's a more efficient model. I mean, it's and they win because they're adhering to the new policy, which they have to do.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, there are so many payviders that are kind of popping up. So as we think about getting patients on lower cost care options, there are providers who are incentivized to get their patients on lower cost options, because it saves the organization as a whole, the health system and plan as a whole. So as you think about the transition to value-based care and being at risk for patients, if you can get a patient on a lower cost option that is equivalent to the higher price option, why would you not do that?
Right.
And there's no way a doctor can know exactly what is covered under every patient's plan. There's hundreds of thousands of procedures and medications and care options. So with direct connections between the EHR and the plans, we're able to deliver that information in real time when it matters most.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So just switching back to marketing a bit, you guys seem very committed to account-based marketing. Is that true? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think every organization needs to be thinking about account-based marketing.
How do you how do you approach ABM?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, 3 primary markets that we're approaching. So as we think about, I'll just pick on the provider market specifically. We're working with our commercial team very closely, usually on a quarterly basis, to understand their top accounts. So where are the health systems? What are the health systems that you want to start building relationships with? Going back to our relationship-driven approach, is there a top 10 list? Is there a top 50 list? Is there a top 100 list? And we can really segment out different campaigns for each of those tiers of that list.
Yep.
So, for example, we may be sending specific content like demos or webinars to our top 10 accounts. And that could come from the salesperson who's already built a relationship or that we've already engaged with.
Yeah.
But as we get kind of further down into the lower tier accounts, it could be more warming content like blogs or news pieces or general awareness. So we definitely are thinking about account-based marketing. We haven't gotten to the level of one-to-one account-based marketing. I know there are organizations out there that can advertise specifically to one health system with one specific ad. We haven't gotten to that level of sophistication yet.
Right.
But as we think about LinkedIn ads and sales support and scripting and how we're messaging, whether it's by state, there are lots of health systems in Texas, right? So we can create scripting or campaigns for Texas specifically. We think about account-based marketing in that way so that we can be received better from those organizations.
I think the key to what you're doing is the alignment between sales and marketing. I mean, everybody knows, right? This sales, ABM doesn't work if sales and marketing aren't joined at the hip. But it's this that you're working out. You're letting the salespeople sort of say, these are the accounts we need to really pay special attention on. What can we create for them to help nurture relationships? And then expanding the funnel with the sort of the next tier of smaller accounts or less developed accounts, and doing more sort of mass type things.
Yeah, I think account-based marketing is interesting. There's a lot of different approaches to account-based marketing. In some markets, it's valuable to hit an account and everyone at that account with advertising and with messaging and with emails. I don't think that necessarily works in healthcare. At a health system, if I look on LinkedIn or Definitive or ZoomInfo, wherever you're getting your data from, a health system may have 10,000 employees. But when we're thinking about who our key stakeholders are, there might only be 3 or 5.
Right.
So we've scaled back a little bit, kind of the general account-based marketing approach that says influencers are the most important thing. Because what we've found is that getting in front of our key stakeholders is most beneficial. Now, other markets where it's more of a flat hierarchy, it is very beneficial to get in front of as many people as possible. But I haven't personally seen that work because, like I said, healthcare is relationship driven. We have specific conversations with specific people who can make a buying decision.
That's very interesting. Do you use any of the do you use an orchestration platform, or do you use a ABM platform like Terminus or demand based or anything like that?
I've actually used both of them in the past, but at RXRevu we don't use them today. For a number of different reasons, but I think we're getting similar targeting functionality through LinkedIn because we're able to say, I want to send this ad to these 15 accounts and these 25 titles. So we primarily leverage LinkedIn for similar account-based marketing capabilities. Right. Now that doesn't get us on across the web ads. But we use both the Google ad network and the LinkedIn ad network to try and get as close to our audiences as we can. Right.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that those orchestration platforms are particularly helpful, and intent data is particularly helpful, but you actually don't need it to practice ABM.
I think like I mentioned earlier, there's levels of sophistication, and we're still in the early stages where we're targeting, understanding who our top accounts are, and we're beginning to get the message in front of them. Now, if we had 500 accounts that we didn't know anything about, I think that intent data is incredibly valuable, because otherwise you'll be blasting the market with messaging, trying to figure out who's going to be receptive. But there is intent data that can be really valuable. We're just not quite at that stage yet.
Right. Great insights. So, Adam, as we come to a close here, I want to ask you a question which I ask all my guests. And it's that question which is, if you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, something that, you wish you'd known whenever it was, what would that advice be?
It's a really good question. I think one of the most important things that I've tried to do across my career, but I should have maybe focused on even more, is try to surround yourself with smart people. There are so many tasks and projects and things that I'm working on as an individual that oftentimes I think I can accomplish as an individual. But in reality, it's always helpful to collaborate and surround yourself with smart, experienced, approachable people. Not only will your output quality increase, but you'll learn more. You'll do well at that company by building relationships. But I also think it makes work fun to have that strong group of people, strong group of smart people that you can learn from and continue to bounce ideas off of. So I think as I look back, the advice I'd give myself is look at the company not only for what they're doing and the value and the benefit to patients and providers and the rest of the healthcare ecosystem, but how can they help you as an individual grow?
Yeah, that's really great advice. Well, Adam, it's been a terrific pleasure having you on the podcast. I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners will do as well. So before I go, I just want to let anybody who's watching the video know that you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Spotify or whatever your favorite podcast application is. And if you're listening to the podcast, you can watch the video of these two handsome young Adams. Actually, one of the Adams is young, the other one, me, is not so young. But you can watch the video of this through a link in the show notes. And do subscribe. We've got a great program of guests coming up, and we have 15 other episodes that you can listen to covering everything from ABM to branding to events to customer-centric marketing. It's really we've building up a big library of content that I hope health tech marketers will find useful. So thank you for listening, and if you've got a topic you want to cover, you can reach me at adam@healthlaunchpad.com or find me on LinkedIn. Bye.